Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to today's class. My name is Srinivas Rao, Assistant Professor, Department of Microbiology. Today, we'll talk about history of microbiology. Today, we'll talk about history of microbiology. We are very familiar with the concept called as history. Any subject or any content has some history. We have an history to be discussed. What the history consists? We are very familiar that history begins with controversies and contradictions and ends with some solution. History starts with something confusion, but it ends with a solution. So there is a beauty in the history. It enlightens us. It tells us how our previous people are. It tells us how the best things we had. It tells us how worse things they are or they were experienced. The history has a lot of feelings, it has emotions. History conveys joy, history conveys worry, history conveys grief, history gives an inspiration. When you see the context of history of microbiology, we all going to experience all these emotions. When you know about history of microbiology, we have the joy, we have grief, we have mourning, we have very bad situations, we have something inspirations. All these things means it's a culmination of different feelings we can experience while you are going to study history of microbiology. Okay, let's go into the history of microbiology. Now we'll talk about history of microbiology. Yeah, first what should we know is what our ancestors know. It's one of the curious question, right? What they have known, what they have knew. It's a really interesting. What do they know and what we know today? If you think this question, what they might have known, aren't they really know about what is microbiology and what are microorganisms? Because our subject is something very curious one, not like other disciplines which they can see with our eye and say, yes, it is something we can see and we can study and we can observe. But our subject is something different where you cannot see. Our subject is like emotions. We cannot see emotions, but we can feel it. The same manner, our subject microbiology, it's nothing to visible to our eyes, but we can feel. We can sense every movement of our organisms. Do they really, our ancestors, know about microorganisms and their presence? Okay, let us see now. Yeah. If you see here, prehistoric humans had very limited understanding of the cause of disease. The various cultures developed different beliefs and explanations, while many believed that illness was punishment of angering the god or was simply the result of fate. Yeah, this was the notion with the prehistoric humans. They have very limited understanding the cause of diseases. They not even don't know why these are because. Diseases are because means we have various cultures. When you see the previous ages, we have unclassified cultures, unclassified religions, and we can see it's like we have a tribal religions, have different beliefs. People thought that illness was a punishment of a god and goddess. So it was the knowledge our prehistoric humans had. And you have different cultures, practices, beliefs. I think still we have the same. Now we are in 21st century. In front, there are many inventions. So we have been observing how the evolution has occurred, how the technology and development came into the light. Since the corners of the globe, we can experience blind beliefs, cultural practices, thinking that they may be angering of God. Presently, we are facing very worse situation in the form of COVID-19 infection. The globe was struck. People are arrested to the homes. Businesses are collapsed. Governments are wondering, they are worrying what to do. Still, the people are suffering from a kind of infection. What is it? It's a virus. It's not all because of the anger of the God and something else. The same kind of epidemics and pandemics occurred in prehistoric human days, but they knew very less about microorganisms and diseases. And this was the knowledge they had. And you can see several ancient civilizations appear to have had some understanding that disease could be transmitted by things they could not see. This is especially evident in historical attempts to contain the spread of disease. When you see some of the civilizations, even though our prehistoric humans may have limited understanding of these diseases, but some of the ancient civilizations are conveying, when you go back to the literatures of histories, those are giving some knowledge how people behaved according to the diseases and infections they suffered. For example, some of the quotes in the Bible, they referred about practicing quarantine for the people who suffered from leprosy, suggesting that eliminate them because it is a communicable. But one of the pathetic situation is that people may don't know. When you see leprosy now, leprosy is a communicable disease now. Though we quarantine, it's a communicable disease as like as mycobacterium, but it's a slow growing, but it spreads among the people very slowly. But when you go back to some ancient histories and literatures, we can see how people practiced some quarantine practices to get rid of infections. And recently, there is archaeological evidences studied about prehistoric people, how they treated their illnesses. Dorji, the Iceman, a 5,300 years old mummy was found in the frozen ice of Alpes. It's between Austria and Italian border in 1991. When the researchers found this mummy and it has infected with some fungal infections and it has infected with some microbial infections. And people observed, when they observed, they found it some of the tattoos on the mummy, and they observed it was stitched. And when they looked inside of it, they found that a woody fruit of Formitopsis, it's a fungi, later discovered that it has an antibiotic property. It conveys us that our prehistoric people had an attempt of doing medication for the illnesses they suffered. This is the mummy which was isolated. This was the mummy, our people, which was in 1991. 1991, what we have seen, this is the mummy, and these are the Tattoos. These are the tattoos what they have observed. Tattoos, the tattooed some stitches, and this is one of the example for quarantine and for lepers in Bible. And this, when comes to here, it's a treatment for plague outbreak. There's a plague outbreak. Plague is one of the epidemic happened in those olden days, and this is about cholera. Cholera epidemic outbreak in London and Western. These are some of the pictures where the people practiced a kind of medicine and kind of a quarantine and kind of treatment processes to get rid of illness. But in spite, they are not aware it's purely because of microorganisms. When you see this, according to previous diagrams, we have the ancient Greeks attributed disease to bad air, malaria. We all know that malaria. We all know that malaria means it's a bad air. Malaria means it's a bad air. See here, malaria. It's a bad air. So we have bad air. Bad air. So bad air here. And we have a miasmatic order. So there is a theory called as miasmatic theory. There's a theory which was developed by Romans. They believed that according to miasma hypothesis, it's created a complex sanitation infrastructure to deal with sewage. And people thought that malaria is all because of a bad order. What they thought that it's a bad order. But what they did, a Greek people developed a great technology, and what they did is they brought fresh water. They brought fresh water into the city at the same time, and they have a giant shiver, and they have very huge drains which take away the wastewater and into the Tigris River. Means they have a practicing of a practice to make and to supply a clean water, and to send wastewater. This was the practice they did. These are our prehistoric people and ancient civilization. When you go through the civilizations, we have different kind of civilizations. According to history, we have Stone Age civilization, we have Iron Age civilization, we have Bronze Age civilizations. These are the different kind of civilization where among these civilizations, the oldest civilization, Egyptian civilization, Greek civilization, and Mesopotamian civilization, you have a Chinese civilization, Indian civilization. All these are different kind of civilization. What the civilization means? Civilization means practicing a technological way of living, which includes the better way of living with respect to the hygienity and hygienity. And when you see, according to Hippocrates is a man. In ancient days, we can see every person, a philosopher or a debater or a excavator or a knowledge fellow, all they are originated from Greeks. They may be from Rome. So this Greek physician Hippocrates in 460 BC to 370, they considered the father of Western medicine. Now all the medical people, they consider him as a father of medicine. Unlike many of his ancestors and contemporaries, he dismissed the idea that disease was caused by supernatural forces. Instead, he positioned that disease had natural cause from within patient or their environments. It's a wonderful statement has given by Hippocrates way back in before Christ. Before our centuries begin, this was given by Hippocrates. It was in the scriptures. And what he said, he just dismissed the idea that disease caused by supernatural forces. There is no supernatural force. He himself believed there is no force called as supernatural force. It's all because of it's a natural cause within the patient and their environment. It's true. If a particular person is diseased, and he is suffering, if this particular person is diseased and he is suffering, we know how a disease will spread. If he sneezes, if he cough, if he shed, if he excrete, what are all these are the ways to get infected in the environment. Now the fellow beings are being infected because of all these activities. This was given by Hippocrates in those days. Because of in those days, religion played a major role and churches used to rule. Now this was not accepted by the people very well. It's a different story. Now I am not discussing about any controversies which are happened between the people, orthodox people, and the people who have a scientific temper. But when it comes to the other man, a Greek philosopher, Thucydides, way back in 460 to 395 BC, consider that he was the father of scientific history. He was a father of scientific history, analyzed cause and effect reasoning. Cause. Among these most important contributions observed regarding Athens plague, which killed 1/3 of the population in Athens between 430 to 410 BC. Plague is one of the erupted disease which happened in those days. Now today we know very well how plague was erupted. A great plague eruption was happened in India, way back in Gujarat, Surat especially. We had all the history. What are the reasons for the plague and which of the organism is responsible for plague and how we have suffered. India too suffered. So Thucydides made the important observation: survivor did not get reinfected with the disease, even when taking care of actively sick people. These observations are nearly understanding the concept of immunity. And this was given a light on the concept of immunity. Means the people who suffered with the plague and when they recovered, they developed immunity and they can take care of the sick people without any problem. It was happen. And then when you see Marcus Tertius grow there which cannot be seen by an eye, which floats in the air and enter the body through the mouth and nose, and there cause a serious disease. Varro was the prolific Roman writer who was one of the first people to propose the concept that things we cannot see can cause disease. It's one of the brilliant idea. It's one of the brilliant idea which is given by the Varro. It's one of the brilliant idea means brilliant a quotation given by the Varro. What he stated here. proposed things we cannot see can cause disease. Things we cannot see can cause disease. He published in the 36 BC said that precautions must also be taken in neighborhood swamps because of certain minute creatures. What are swamps? What are swamps? Swamps are nothing but small pits which are logged with water. What happens? We know all today. If a water stagnated in a small pits longer time, what we can see? We can see the excessive growth of mosquitoes. A small kind of biodiversity develops there, and it can lead to the vectors for infections. That's why we see in rainy season, most of the vector-borne diseases are epidemic. We can experience malaria, we can experience swine flu, we can experience waterborne infections like typhoid and hepatitis. What are all these things? So we must be taken care of neighborhood swamps because they create certain kind of minute creatures. These creatures held responsible for spreading disease from one to another. This was stated way back in 36 BC. So what are all these things? All it means prehistoric humans to the when the ages are going, or people are awareing on unseen microorganisms. Though the technology was developed in 1800 and early 1900, but way back in BC, people they imagined with their scientific temper and a common sense, they told the people that diseases are not because of the curse of the god, it's all because of something unseen organisms which are spreading from one to another. While the ancient may have suspected the existence of invisible minute creatures, it has taken a long years to confirm it is because of a unseen organism called as microorganism. The dream come true. The dream come true with the invention of a microscope. Still, it is a debated topic who invented microscope. There is no clear history who first invented microscope, but in the perception of the or in the view of microbiology, everybody believes that the first microscope was developed by Antoine van Leeuwenhoek. He was a Dutch cloth merchant, and he was the man behind the development of the microscope. And he was the man. After his inventions, a light was slightly focused onto the unseen objects, and now the people are very curious to learn about them. We'll talk much about Antoine van Leeuwenhoek in his contributions exclusively. And nearly 200 years after Leeuwenhoek got the first glimpse of microbe, after 200 years, the golden era of microbiology was started. And new discoveries were embarked between 1857 to 1914. Till that time, the microbiology has faced a dark phase. It is in we call it as in lag mode. It's in the lag mode. Yeah, it's something introduction regarding history, but we need to understand one thing. When you're talking about history, it's a simple. History debated many things. I already told you, it arose from controversies. But controversies leads to debates. Debates has given a solution. We studied, when you see the chronological order of history from Antoine van Leeuwenhoek and Robert Hooke, now a light focused onto the microbiology, and now the people are talking. We have a prehistoric notion, still we won't believe it's all because of organisms. It's all because of unseen microorganisms. There is a debate between orthodox people and scientific tempered people. And the orthodox people believe that there is a theory called as abiogenesis, or else we can call it as a spontaneous generation theory. What this theory states? The spontaneous generation theory states that an organism is spontaneously evolves from a non-biological source. It spontaneously, for example, if there is a mud, automatically when you see after summer season, we can see the rainy season. Rainy season, in a summer season, the ponds are dried, or some rocky cravings are get dried. But when the rain comes, after 2-3 weeks of a rain comes, water occupies in the small places. There you can see some kind of biosphere ecosystem. You can see tiny creatures. You and me can think. Previously there was nothing here, but after rain has come, how these creatures has come into this particular a pond or a pit or a water, where there is no proper evidences people to believe that it was spontaneously arose. Life doesn't require a life, but it requires some biological things can give rise to biological things. Spontaneously arises means some maggots comes from some mud, maggots come from the meat, and some creatures, tiny creatures comes from the mud, and some frogs comes from the water. These are the notions, and this was called as a spontaneous generation theory. Was this theory was true? Was this theory was true? And is proven correctly? Now let us see how this was theory debated. See, when you see here, a Greek philosopher and Aristotle was one of the earliest recorded scholar to articulate the theory of spontaneous generation, the notion that life can arise from non-living matter. Aristotle proposed that life arose from non-living material if the material contained vital heat. Means if a material has any heat and it automatically gives rise to an organism. Means here there is a notion. Always life can arise from a non-living matter. It is one of the input given by Aristotle. But 1 year passes after invention of the microscope by Anton van Leeuwenhoek, the man first who has taken the challenge of spontaneous generation theory, who was engaged very eagerly to disproving spontaneous generation theory. The man behind is a Francisco Redi. The man is Francisco Redi. He is Francisco Redi. Is a man. Francisco Redi. What he made? See, showed that maggots on decaying meat came from fly eggs. Maggots came from fly eggs. It's not a meat readily. It's not a meat. For say example, it's not a meat bowl. This was a meat bowl, and it has a meat here, and this meat bowl is not readily helped for an organism to come up in this meat bowl. So this is the meat bowl where our man kept a meat, and he stated that when you kept a meat over here, he placed a meat here, and he observed by doing differently, and he said the meat is decayed, not automatically or spontaneously, but it is all because of some flies brought some eggs onto the meat. That's why the meat was decayed. See here, this was the experiment he made. What was the experiment he made? Yeah, he has taken 3 different containers. It's an open container with meat. Now you can see it's an open container with meat. Now this is the open container. This is the meat. When you open the meat, you can see these are the flies. The flies came upon and they laid eggs on the meat. They laid eggs means formation of maggots. Some small gives a way to arrows of small maggots. And when you see here another experiment, he taken same jar and is screwed with a cork. Here is a cork, means it won't allow any kind of flies to go in. When the cork is sealed, there are no maggots. You simply observe, there are no maggots, there are no eggs over here, no eggs, no flies, nothing. But again, he just covered with a maggot. Means here, the smell of the meat attracts the flies to come near. When it's screwed with a cork, there is no smell, no flies. But in covered with a gauze cloth here, the air will come from the meat, the smell will come from the meat, and it attracted the flies. But flies cannot go into the meat. But when they surfaced on the gauze cloth, and you can see these are the maggots of the flies. And he said that there are no maggots, there is no decaying of the meat. He stated that, and he stated against to the theory of spontaneous generation. And he said, maggots are carried by the flies. And these are responsible for meat to spoil. Then there are controversies. Again, there is a man, John Needham, he's an English scientist. And he was favored towards the spontaneous generation theory and did an experiment. Again, he has taken meat like this. He has taken meat. He taken meat and he boiled the meat. He taken the meat and he boiled the meat. See here. He taken the meat and he boiled. Now when he boiled the meat and he left free. He left free. The bottle was not sealed. Means when the meat broth was boiled, if any organisms are there, they will die. But what he did is, John Needham, he boiled the meat and he cooled it and he left it unscrewed, uncapped. There is no cap over here. You see here, the flaw in this particular experiment was there, the flask was not sealed, exposed to air, stating that air may carry something, and so that this meat broth was contaminated and it has given for organisms to rise. And he said, see, I boiled the meat. If anything is in the meat, it should supposed to die. But you see, the organisms are arose, he said, John Needham. But this is not a satisfactory answer to these scientific tempered people in those days. And again, there is a man, Lazzaro Spallanzani. He's an Italian scholar. He just improved the John Needham's experiment. He just improved John Needham experiment. He did the same. This is the John Needham experiment. He did the same, but what he did is he boiled the meat and he capped it, he screwed it. When he screwed, he boiled the meat and screwed with a cork, which won't allow any kind of air to pass in if there was no growth. But the people who supported spontaneous generation theory debated. Again, they debated. Means, I already told you, history has debates. They debated. You screwed it. So how life will be supported without supply of oxygen? We won't believe you in your experiment. This is not a correct experiment. It stopped the passage of air into the, without air, there is no existence of the life. So Lazarus Spelangini, you won't have a proper answer. Then again, spontaneous generation theory people, they are saying something like this. The scientists we need to talk about Theodor Schwann and Dush, Skulls and Shoulder. They did an experiment. Schwann and Dush, they just capped with the cotton plug. Schwann and Dush, they capped with a cotton plug. Schwann and Dush are the people responsible for the plugging of the cotton to the conical flask and all these things. The spontaneous generation people are not believed because you are filtering air, the air was filtered, and you did different kind of experiments. They have challenged. You just altered the form of air so that it will not allow the organism to grow in the meat broth. The debate over spontaneous generation theory continued till 19th century. People are debating. To settle the debate, the Paris Academy of Science offered a prize for resolution of the problem. And we all know that there is a prominent man from the French, his chemist is working on fermentation by that time. And he accepted the challenge. And what he did is, he did a very nice experiment, and which has given blow to the spontaneous generation theory. That was a Swan-necked experiment. The Swan-neck experiment done by Louis Pasteur has given a blow to the spontaneous generation theory, and his experiment made the spontaneous generation people to shut down their mouths. What happened? We'll see. Yeah, he did an experiment disproving the spontaneous generation theory, and for that experiment he got a prestigious Albert Prize from the Paris Academy of Science in 1862. In a subsequent lectures, he explained and articulated life only comes from life. He has a given statement. He has given very wonderful statement to the people. Life only comes from life. Life will not arise from non-life objects. To this, John Tyndall added some of the quotes. He demonstrated that dust carries microorganisms. Tyndall experiment. John Tyndall. He pokes light onto the nutrient broth, and he has seen the scattering of the light by absorbing the light, and he showed that dust was absent. Nutrient broth remains sterile even if directly exposed to the air. Also provided evidence for the existence of exceptionally heat-resistant form of bacteria. What happened here? He stated that if the air is free, though you expose a meat broth to the air, it will not contaminate. Another one is Frederick Kohn. He told the people that still we have a heat-resistant bacteria could produce spores. We'll talk about spores in next lessons. See, this was a very beautiful and simple experiment conducted by the Louis Pasteur. See, this is a Swan-necked experiment. See, this is fitted with a goose-necked funnel, and he kept a meat. When he kept a meat broth here, this is a meat broth free of live cells. These are the broth free. What he did is, and heated it and kept it like that. The broth has no organisms. Why? When the air goes like this, it traps here, air automatically gets sterilized, and whatever the organisms present on the surface stick onto the surface, and filtered air will go into the broth. And there is another experiment here. When the neck is not set it properly, it was contaminated because air directly going to the meat and it was spoiled. The airborne microorganism trapped at the base and broth is sterile here. Very simple experiment. No acid treatment, no heat treatment, no corkscrewing, no cotton plugging, nothing. Just air is passed through the bended funnel and microorganisms unable to enter into the broth, and it was not infected by any organisms, and broth is sterile. And it was a big blow given to the spontaneous generation theory supporters, and this how a theory of abiogenesis was disproved. A controversy was disproved at the end of these experiments. But in the history, we have controversies after controversies, debates after debates, and inventions of the inventions. Next, we'll talk about germ theory of disease. What is this germ theory of disease? Germ theory of disease based on concept that many diseases are caused by infections with microorganisms. It is another phase of theory. We have believed that microorganisms are responsible for infections and diseases. And this theory explains about, yes, these organisms are responsible for the diseases. See, the notion that disease could be spreaded by seed-like entities, and this was given by Girolamo Fracastro in 1500. He said, disease spreads like a seed. When you show the seeds in the field, how they spread. Like manner, the disease spreads among the people, given by Fracastro. And we have another scientist called as Agostino Bassi. In the early 1800 conducted a series of experiments which demonstrated that a disease afflicting silkworms at that time was caused by a parasite. And there is we all know very about febrile disease of silkworm. Finally, it was solved with the involvement of Louis Pasteur. We'll talk about febrile silk disease in the contributions of Louis Pasteur. And Agostino Bassi said it's because of a parasite. And Ignaz Semmelweis, and he was Ignaz Semmelweis was an obstetrician in the mid 18th centuries, 1800 and almost all in the 19th century. And he observed that women are giving birth and most of the women are dying. It's because of a peripheral fever. And he observed, he noticed, while he's an obstetrician, he's doing many operations and all the things, cutting umbilical cord and doing operation after another operation. Like this, the mothers who are giving birth to the people are suffering with the pleural fever and they are getting killed. And he noticed. Semmelweis, then he noticed, yes, it's something happening and something is happening. These operation tables and practices are leading to the infections. And he implemented a mandatory hand washing in a chlorinated solution, lime water, prior to the assisting with the births. And the practice has reduced the mortality rate of childbirth from 18% to the 2.2%. A great work done by the Semmelweis. Next, John Snow was one of the first to publish an epidemiological study describe the transmission of cholera by a fecal oral route. Epidemiology is one of the branch of science which deals with how a disease spreads and causes. First time in the history, John Snow described how the disease is transmitted. He worked on cholera in 1854. In 1854, there is a cholera outbreak in London. People are dying. Cholera outbreak in London, the people are dying, they're killing. There is no proper treatment. And John Snow was a physician and he was engaged. And he observed that there is a hand pump. There is a water supply pump, hand pump or hand pump, which supplies the water. It supplies the municipal water, hand pump, municipal water. They noticed that the people who are drinking water which is coming from this particular pump are suffering with the cholera. And he digged and he investigated the pipe. And he investigated the pipeline. When he investigated the pipeline, somewhere in a particular distance, this drinking water pipeline was broken, and it is very adjacent to the drainage which is carrying sewage, and which leads the sewage water to mix up. Sewage water to mix up in the drinking water, and hence the people who are drinking this water suffering from the cholera. It's a fecal oral route with the sewage. Sewage has all kind of domestic waste, sewage waste, and all the things, and this was contaminated in the water. And this is how he said first time in history how a disease will transmit from one to another. And then Robert Koch, he's the man behind. And he used to demonstrate that each specific disease is caused by a specific microorganism. He was a contemporary of Louis Pasteur from Germany. We'll discuss much in his contributions. Robert Koch did an experiment to prove disease is caused by, always a specific disease is caused by a specific microorganism. And he did an experiment and he given some theories, some theorems, like some points. We call them as Koch postulates. Here they are. The Koch postulates state that microorganism must be observed in every case of the disease. It must be isolated and grown in pure culture. The pure culture, when inoculated in animals, must reproduce the disease. Next, microorganism must be recovered from the diseased animal. See, first one, microorganism must be observed in every case of disease. Means every case of disease. Per se, there is a disease. Here is a disease. Disease must associate with a microorganism. When this microorganism must be grown in a pure culture like this. Means when you prepare a petri plate like this, when you get a culture from the diseased microorganism, for example, it is a diseased organism. When you get a culture from this diseased organism, when you plate it on a petri plate, you get colonies like this. Means it should grow on petri. Now this is the pure culture. When you give this pure culture to an healthy animal, the same animal must experience the symptoms and disease as it was experienced. And again, from this, we need to isolate the same organism again as we did here. The same microorganism must be isolated without any change. And we need to observe the same. Means again, we should get the pure culture from the animals. So, to call a microorganism as a diseased or pathogenic, it must associate with the disease. It's supposed to be isolated in pure cultured form. When you give this pure culture to the healthy animal, it must manifest the same symptoms. And again, when we isolate an organism from the previous one, it must have the same similarities with the older one. But there are some limitations in the Koch postulates. When you talk about few of the organisms, if you talk about virus, and there are some uncultivated microorganisms are there, We cannot cultivate them in a bacteriological artificial media. There are some exceptions and limitations in the Koch postulates. But most of the organisms, they follow Koch postulates to state them as diseased organisms. If you see, there is, then after that, there are some events happened in the history of immunology. We can see history of immunology. I already told you, way back, paved way for the immunology. Many things happened in history. When you see the history of immunology, again, we should go back to the 1700. We should go to 1700. See here, at the time of Jenner, Edward Jenner. He was the man behind vaccination. He was the man behind vaccination. Before that, there is a lady Montagu. Lady Montagu. She was a wife of British ambassador to the Istanbul. Means it's now in Istanbul. It's a British ambassador to the Turkey. It's in Istanbul, and she practiced there the process called as variolation. Variolation. It is a local and traditional practice among those people who are suffering from a smallpox or inoculated with legions of cowpox pustules. It's a variolation practice. This lady Montagu went back to the London and Europe. Most of the Europe was practiced for centuries. For centuries together, there is a practice of variolation among the Western world to get rid of smallpox. One among them is Edward Jenner. He was variolated. He grew up and he passionate towards knowing about the cowpox in relation with the smallpox. And he used to listen some of the tales of the said by the milkmaids. We are safe and secured from the smallpox, and he just practiced. And he inoculated pustules of the cowpox infected patients into the healthy people. First he did with James Pitt, and he was succeeded. And he did a practice in the Western world long back, the process of vaccination by inoculating cowpox pustules. Cowpox pustules. Later, this work was taken up by the, after almost all, it is in 1700. And when it comes to almost all 100 years later, the work extensively taken up by the Louis Pasteur. Extensively taken up by the Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur contributions are many. He is the man behind disproving the spontaneous generation theory. He was the man in germ theory of disease. He was the man that identified the causative organism for the fermentation. He was the man behind the chicken cholera vaccine identification. He was the man behind the curing the febrile disease of silkworm, and he was the man behind giving rise to the rabies vaccine. Rabies vaccine. And when you see the chronological history of microbiology, if you see in a short while, the history is like this. From Robert Hooke publications here, 1665, Robert Hooke publications. From Robert Hooke publications, some here, and the work of the Francisco Redi, and identification of the animalcules by the Leeuwenhoek in 1600, and Lazarus Pellegrini. He was the man who attacked the spontaneous generation theory, and cowpox vaccine introduced by the Edward Jenner, what we studied so far. And this was the Snow, John Snow, as we discussed. He was the first man behind identification of the cholera because of the water from the pump. And this was the man who disproved spontaneous generation theory. And Koch, who was the man in Germany, identified the causative disease for the anthrax, that is Bacillus anthracis, and he was the man behind identifying the pure culture techniques. And there is a man called as Metchnikoff who identified the process of phagocytosis and who developed the gram staining and who developed the autoclave technology. And we see rabies vaccine developed by the Louis Pasteur. And when it comes to the agricultural field, Vinogradsky studied sulfur nitrifying bacteria, and Bazernik isolated some of the nodulated microorganisms. And Bazernik proved that not only bacteria, there are smaller things other than the bacteria which are causing infections to the tobacco, and he named it as a contagium vivum fluid. And there is, after the invention of something new in the history of plant pathology, or we can call it as agricultural microbiology, a new discipline arose. That is proving smaller objects or smaller organisms than the bacteria. It's all dedicated work by the Bazernik. Next one is we can see mosaic disease. This is a tobacco mosaic disease was observed, and you can see D. Hillary. These are the people who are behind the. These are the people who are they studied a branch of virology. D. Hillary discovered the bacteriolized bacteriophages. And in 1923, Burgess Manual. Now the bacterial taxonomists came. They identified and they segregated bacteria into different classes by studying their cultural characters, staining characters, morphological characters, biochemical characters, and all the things. And later Griffith came to the discovery of the bacterial transformation. Fleming discovered the antibiotics from the penicillium, and Nolan Rusk who built up the electron microscope. After the invention of the electron microscope 1932 by Nolan Rusk, it has changed the fate of microbiology. And there's a human genome project was taken up in 1990, and Watson Crick proposed DNA as a genetic material, and Jacob and Monod talked about Lacoprone concept. Davor Smith, this was the breakthrough in the recombinant DNA technology, discovering of the restriction endonucleases. All that when you see under 1884 it was identification of the HIV virus, and so on. When you see the SARS virus and genomic influenza virus and outbreak of the swine flu, outbreak of the MERS virus, now in 2020 we are observing the outbreak of COVID-19. From way back centuries, from prehistoric time to now, there's a long and lengthy history of microbiology, which has many controversies, debates, and people engaged, invested their lot of time and treasure to devoting and identifying something into this world. And it's much curious to know about history of microbiology. There is a much to be discussed of history of microbiology, but I just consigned it. I consigned the history of microbiology, but we are going to talk much more while we are talking about each and every contributor for what they have contributed to the history of microbiology. Thank you.